We're outside of Portland, Oregon at Leica, one of the most interesting companies working in animation today. Unlike traditional studios, Leica uses a combination of stop-motion animation techniques and things like 3D printing to create animated worlds that don't look like anything else out there.
Ah! Wait, I don't get it.
Lucky us, they've got a new film coming out and we got to hear all about it.
On the page, this seemed like not the kind of movie you should be trying to make in stop motion. It was huge, and I think that's why we decided to do it. I think all the skills that we've learned, all the innovations that we've made on the previous movies have kind of set us up to make this one.
You're the man for the job. How's my breath?
On this movie, there's so many little things that you might not necessarily notice, but together, they probably made this the most innovative movie that we've ever made. The facial animation on our previous 4 movies, we used a kit system of faces, so we would replace the faces onto the puppets, and we pieced together dialogue sentences using pre-existing faces. On this movie, we wanted more nuance, we wanted more subtle acting, and the way we ended up doing it was bespoke animation, so that each shot has its own specific faces that are just for that shot, and that allowed us to come up with performances that were unique to that moment, to that thought, to that line of dialogue. That's something we've never done before, but it has given the animation a lot more complexity.
We're using 3D printing in a really unique way. We're actually using 3D printing as sort of our mass production tool, where we are mass producing hundreds of thousands, actually 106,000 unique faces for the film Missing Link. Leica started a technique back on the film Coraline, where we had this idea of using this age-old technique of replacement animation, which was typically done by hand sculpting individual facial expressions. And our idea was to fuse it with 21st century 3D printing technology. We've actually gone through 4 different types of 3D printing technology. We started with Polyjet technology made by Stratasys, which was essentially a single color resin printing. But at the time, Coraline and all of the faces that we produced on Coraline needed to be hand painted. So starting on Paranorman, we moved to a color 3D printer. And that color 3D printer was made by a company called Z Corp, and it was called the Z650. And it was powder-based printing. And that technology was our base technology for Paranorman, Box Trolls, and the human characters on Kubo and the Two Strings. Starting on Kubo, we played around a little bit with this emerging resin color printing. It was a Stratasys Connex 3 machine, and that Connex 3 machine allowed you to mix 3 colors, which was pretty limiting. You couldn't print the rainbow. You sort of had to choose what 3 colors you were going to mix. Shortly thereafter, Stratasys released the J750, which allowed you to put 6 colors into a machine and mix them and come up with a huge gamut of color. And at that time, the software that Stratasys was building to run the machine was pretty limited. So we ended up needing to partner with a research institute out of Germany called Fraunhofer. And Fraunhofer had developed this advanced color 3D printing slicing software called Cuttlefish. And that unique combination and that unique relationship allowed us to produce the wonderful faces you see on Missing Link.
The requests for the performance of puppets as we move through each Leica film is incrementally more. We speak about sort of puppets taking a breath and living. The materials that we landed on, they work well for the reason of they've got range. They'll move beautifully. But that said, when an object is made of something, but it's supposed to be something else, ensuring that it doesn't look like that material is something that we dial in, and that has its own complexity. I mean, if we look at Link, for example, he has all those fur pieces. Well, he has a kind of rubber suit, if you like, for the main part, and if those fur pieces kind of fold or buckle, then that destroys the illusion and that destroys the performance. So even something as simple as that, to actually arrive at and then put in place for mass manufacture, because that's something we also have to consider quite deeply, is really something. Yeah. I believe stop motion is still relevant because it really is
the quintessence of what filmmaking is, and that is, to me, it's real light on real objects. From an aesthetic point of view, there is something about the tactility of stop motion that makes it compelling. When we did Paranorman, Angry Aggie, the spirit girl at the end, and she was a combination of a stop motion puppet, and she had a CG dress, and her facial animation was 2D. So she was a real hybrid. And I remember sitting with people and they couldn't quite work out what it was that they were looking at. Was it a puppet? Wasn't it? That's what I like, is when people are kind of riveted to this image on screen and they're not quite sure how we did it. And there's something magical about that. I am not a stop motion purist. I love stop motion. I embrace it. I think it's my favorite medium. But in the end, what I want to do is put an image on screen that looks the best it possibly can. And really, filmmaking, certainly of this kind, is telling a story. And the hope is that you have an audience of people who are compelled by the characters, care about the characters, and are sucked into that story. And I certainly don't want the artifice to take them back out the story again. That is a valid artistic decision to make. You can do that by all means. I love movies that do that. But for me, that's not what we're trying to do. We're trying to tell a story and use whatever means possible to get the best image in front of the audience.
Bravo. Thank you.